In the forgotten corners of Asia, where forest paths vanish into fog and incense smoke coils like memory, there are stories no one dares to speak aloud. But here, we whisper them. Welcome to Whispers of Asia, a sacred threshold between the living and the dead, where ancient rituals still echo in hollow halls, where widows keep vigil, monks burn names, and spirits wait for answers never given. Every tale you hear is drawn from shadows, threaded with truth, bound by silence. So light a lantern and follow the sound of bells. It was the morning the drum stopped. The village, still wrapped in the gray hush of dawn, stirred only with the sound of sandals brushing against the stone paths, of breath held tight in aging chests, of husbands pressing the backs of their wives' hands to their foreheads as if to memorize warmth. The forest edge trembled beneath a rising wind, one that always seemed to come before someone was taken. May stood in front of the shrine, her kimono soft with wear and the hem damp with dew. Her hands, still young and uncalloused, trembled as they tied the final knot around the incense bundle. The smoke curled upward, vanishing into the canopy above, as if the sky itself refused to witness this morning. He stood beside her, a soldier now, no longer the boy who carved whistles from bamboo or whispered dreams beside the riverbank, no longer the lover who kissed her shoulder under a rainy roof. His hands were wrapped in linen, his eyes shadowed by orders he did not write. "Kazuo," she whispered, not daring to raise her voice in a place of spirits. "Will you come back?" He looked at her, long and slow, like someone watching a house disappear in fog. "I will return," he said. "Even if not in body, I will return to you." And he placed a single coin on the wooden shelf of the shrine, a soldier's coin, engraved with his unit's seal and the family crest etched faintly beside it. "If I cannot find the way, leave the lantern lit. I will follow its flame." Mai nodded, though her throat refused sound. She reached into the pouch at her waist and retrieved a piece of red thread, wrapping it once around his wrist and then hers. No knot, no bow, only a loop of promise. Wind rustled the leaves. Somewhere in the trees a crow called once. Then the sound of boots came, rows and rows of them, breaking the stillness as the conscripts were gathered. Kazuo did not look back when he walked into the forest's throat. May did not follow. She turned back to the shrine, knelt, and lit the lantern. She would not leave again. The shrine was small, built of cedar wood and layered with generations of offerings. Some were long decayed, dolls with no eyes, bones wrapped in silk, strings of prayer beads faded by rain, but they remained untouched. No villager dared clean it. It was not theirs. May swept the path gently, laying fresh rice on a clay dish. The flame of the lantern flickered beside her, caught in a breeze that came from nowhere. She did not speak that day, nor the next. When the letter came, 2 weeks later, the ink had run from the rain. Only one word remained legible: lost. Her mother screamed. Her father tore the letter in half and cursed the war. But May only stepped away, slowly, as if walking underwater, and returned to the forest. She moved into a small hut near the shrine, once used by hermits, now home to a girl wrapped in silence. The villagers whispered. They called it grief madness, said the shrine had taken her, or perhaps she had become one of its offerings. But May never listened. She listened only to the rustle of leaves, the low creak of wood in the night, and the flutter of moth wings against the lantern glass.
Each evening she lit the lantern again and waited. Seasons passed. Her hair remained dark. Her hands grew skilled at weaving, at sweeping, at boiling rice with a few drops of rain. Her eyes changed. They lost the shine of youth, replaced with something stiller, like a pond that no longer reflects the sky, but remembers what fell into it long ago. Sometimes children wandered too close to the shrine and swore they heard weeping from the woods. But when their mothers came, all they found was May, kneeling before the lantern, humming a tune no one else remembered. One winter, a traveler from the south coast arrived, a merchant who had once served with Kazuo's regiment. He sought out the village, offering condolences, and told tales of battles fought and names carved into tablets by the sea. But when he saw the shrine and a woman kneeling before it, he went pale. "That's his coin," he whispered. "He died holding it. I saw it in his hand." "No," she said quietly. "He gave it to me." The merchant left before sunset. The villagers watched from their windows as his cart vanished, as if swallowed by the forest itself. That night, the lantern flickered wildly. May sat beside it, hands wrapped in her shawl, lips pale. "I don't care what they say. You gave it to me. You promised." And from the trees, a wind replied, not cold, not loud, but listening. Years passed. She did not count them. The lantern never ran out of oil. Sometimes villagers swore they saw her carrying bowls of fireflies. Others said the light burned without fuel. No one could say for certain. Few dared approach. But every evening, without fail, the shrine glowed. And a woman waited, not for a miracle, not for a return in flesh, but for a voice that would say her name again in the hush before the dawn.
There is a hush in the forest that does not belong to wind or wildlife. It is older than the trees. It tastes like incense and grief. Mai did not name the place. She only found it. A clearing, half wild and half watched, where tall pines leaned as if listening, where light trickled through the needles in shafts, not beams, where time no longer passed, but pooled. She cleared it herself, stone by stone, branch by branch. Her hands bled, but she said no words. The shrine was not built in prayer, but in silence. Every log lifted, every roof tile set, was another breath held between lifetimes. The villagers had their own temple. Their gods wore robes and crowns. Their halls echoed with drums and chanting. But this shrine, this one was for someone who had left and might still return. Mai lined the altar with rice paper. She stitched his name again and again across it in faded ink until the wind tore the first one away. She carved his initials into a strip of driftwood and placed it above the incense bowl. On the back wall, she pinned the red thread, now frayed but unbroken. And each day, at the same hour, she began the ritual. First, the bowl of clean water, drawn from the stream below, carried in a gourd. She poured it slowly into the hollow stone in front of the shrine, so slowly the forest could drink with her. Second, the rice, a small handful pressed into a circle. She did not cook it. It was not for eating. It was a signal that someone still waited, that the bond had not crumbled. Third, the flame, a single taper
lit from a flint and wrapped in his old handkerchief. She placed it at the base of the lantern and let the heat kiss the cold glass awake. Forth her voice, though it barely rose above a breath. "Kazuo," she whispered as if summoning a memory rather than a man. "It's morning again." And last, her bow, slow, deep, and never rushed. Not once did she miss a day. The forest changed. It no longer feared her presence. The roots shifted to avoid her steps. The birds circled but never cried. Even the foxes, once cautious of fire and humans, now passed within reach of her lantern's glow. Moss thickened along the path. Wildflowers sprouted around the altar, white and scentless, blooming even in frost. And the air began to hum. Not loud, not constant, but if one listened between the rustles, between the calls of owls and the drip of dew, a thread of sound drifted through, as if the shrine had begun to remember. Mai grew leaner, her bones more visible beneath her robes, but her movements remained strong. Ritual preserved her. Villagers on rare occasions came near. They left offerings at the edge, dried tea, old cloth, even incense, but none dared step into the clearing. They said it was sacred now, or haunted, or both. Children whispered of seeing a pale man in uniform standing beside her when the mist grew thick. Elders warned not to say his name aloud. 1 month claimed he saw 2 shadows where only 1 person stood. But Mai said nothing. She only swept the stone path, rebuilt the lantern post after storms, and sang to the trees in a voice that the wind carried away. One evening, during the season of plum rains, a fox crept close. It was thin, soaked, and shaking, one eye clouded with old injury. It sniffed the air around the shrine, then bowed its head and lay beside the offering bowl. Mai watched it for a moment, then broke her silence. "Even you wait for something," she murmured. The fox did not lift its head, but when she lit the lantern, its ears twitched. It remained until sunrise, then vanished into the mist. On that morning, 3 sets of paw prints were found in the mud, 2 belonging to the fox, and 1 too large to match. On the 5th year, Mai added a second bowl. No reason, no explanation, only instinct. She placed it beside the original, and each morning filled them both. 1 for her, 1 for the one who wandered. It never felt foolish, it felt right, like preparing for someone who would knock when the rain stopped, like placing a robe at the edge of the futon, knowing it would be worn. And some nights, just before sleep, she heard breathing beside her pillow, not heavy, not close, but steady, as if the forest exhaled in time with her chest. The trees grew taller. The shrine aged, but it did not decay. The paper peeled, yes, the roof moaned in winter, but the structure held, as if the woods themselves had decided she belonged to them now, as if the forest had adopted her grief as its own. And in that hush, beneath the pines that no longer dropped needles on her roof, Mai sat with hands folded and waited, not in mourning, but in certainty, because somewhere, not far, not near, Someone was walking toward the flame.
Lantern light is not merely illumination. In the forest, under a sky stitched with fading stars, lantern light is memory. It is breath. It is the echo of a name said without sound. Mai learned this on the 7th winter. It was a season without snow, but heavy with frost. The ground crackled when she stepped barefoot to the shrine. The trees no longer wept their leaves. They stood motionless, bare, watching. And yet the lantern still burned. The oil she used was humble, rendered from seeds or bartered in town when she dared return. But it burned clean, clear, undying. She did not understand why until the morning she awoke to find the wick gone cold, but the shrine still bathed in gold. A low amber glow shimmered around the altar, soft as breath. It pulsed, faintly, like something remembering how to live. There was no source, only ash. A delicate ring of white dust rested in the bowl where the flame once lived, and in it one tiny black thread, like a hair. But it was not hers. It was too long, too coarse, too familiar. She cupped it gently in her palm, and that night she lit the lantern again. From then on, something changed. The light came even before she touched the match. It flickered at the edge of dusk, uncalled, but not unwelcome. Sometimes it pulsed in rhythm with her breath. Sometimes it flared when she said his name. "Kazuo," she would whisper into the bowl of flame. "Can you see me now?" The wind would stir the leaves, and once, only once, she thought she heard an answer. It was not a voice. It was not even a word. It was a pause, as if something, somewhere, had stopped just to listen. Children no longer entered the woods, even the bold ones. They said the trees had changed shape, that the moss looked like hands, that the air tasted like blood and tears. But the old women still left offerings at the edge. They understood waiting. Mai no longer saw their faces, but she heard their footsteps, heard the soft clink of ceramic jars being placed gently on flat stones. One left a prayer scroll tied in gold string. Another left dried oranges, long since wrinkled. But it was the third gift that made Mai still. A red hairpin, lacquered wood, simple. It was hers. She had lost it the morning he left, and now it lay at the base of the lantern. Mai did not cry. Her tears had long been given to the soil. Instead, she held the pin between her palms and whispered an old vow. "If you are walking through fire, I will hold the lantern higher." The flame rose slightly in the bowl, though there was no oil beneath it, and that night the air smelled faintly of sandalwood and sweat. His scent, the one she had buried in the folds of her wedding robe. The forest no longer took time. Rain fell when the sky was clear. Moonlight came before sunset. Crickets sang in winter. The veil between seasons, like the veil between worlds, grew thinner, stretched, trembling like old silk. Mai kept a journal once, long ago. She stopped writing when the pages curled with damp and the ink ran like tears. But she kept counting the flickers. Each night before sleep, she sat by the shrine and recorded how many times the flame pulsed before settling. One night, it pulsed twice, then again, then 3 times, 4, 7.
Each pulse was like a heartbeat, like a footstep, as if someone, somewhere, was getting closer. One midnight, as mist clung to the base of the trees and the sky hung low like wet cloth, Maya woke with a jolt. The lantern was glowing, but not alone. Beside it, to its right, a second light, smaller, dimmer, like a candle carried by trembling hands. It flickered once, then twice, then vanished. Mai did not move. She only whispered, "I saw you." And from the trees, something rustled. Not leaves, not animals. Fabric, like the sound of robes brushing bark. The next morning she found footprints. They were shallow, unhurried, leading from the stream to the shrine. Only 10 steps, but they were not hers. They were wider, straighter, and they ended at the spot where she had first placed his coin years ago. The coin was missing. In its place, a folded paper slip, sealed with red wax. She opened it with shaking fingers. Inside, only one word: soon. She said nothing to the villagers when she passed through town. They no longer asked questions. They only watched her go, as if watching the tail of a ghost vanish around a corner. And when she returned to the forest, the wind no longer howled. It breathed. The lantern no longer burned. It watched. And Mai no longer hoped. She knew.
Silence does not come all at once. It arrives slowly, seeping into corners, curling beneath doorways, draping itself over sounds like wet cloth. And when it finally settles, it does not leave. Mai noticed it first in the birds. They stopped singing, not all at once, but little by little. The blue thrush that used to nest near her roof disappeared first, then the tree sparrows, then the slow, lazy call of the forest crows. One day, she realized the woods no longer echoed. The rustle of her robes, the soft pat of her sandals, the whisper of incense stick against stone, these were the only sounds that remained. The rest had faded into stillness. And the shrine accepted the quiet, like breath held too long. The offerings began to wilt, not just with time, but prematurely. She would place fresh-cut flowers in the offering dish, only to find them browned and curling before dusk. Candles melted even when unlit. Rice turned yellow in hours. Only the lantern remained untouched. Its light did not waver. It had become constant. Mai adjusted her rituals. She began offering silence. No chants, no songs, no footsteps outside the boundary of the altar. She let stillness become the prayer. Each breath drawn carefully, each movement made with reverence, as though the air itself were sacred and listening. She no longer asked for his return. She had stopped asking long ago. Now, she simply waited. One morning, as fog crawled low over the moss, Mai brought a mirror to the shrine. A small hand mirror, cracked on one edge, framed in old brass. It had been a gift from him, a wedding token. She placed it beside the lantern. "If you come when I am not watching, look here. I will see you." The mirror clouded instantly. No breath, no mist, just fog inside the glass. And from deep within it, something pulsed,
like a light behind closed eyes. The villagers noticed too. They began to speak of the woods in lowered voices, how nothing moved there anymore, how their dogs barked and refused to cross the stream, how even the wind no longer touched the treetops. Some said it was a curse, others called it sacred ground. The priest from the southern temple suggested sending monks to bless the clearing. But when they arrived, they could not find the path. 3 monks entered before dawn. None reached the shrine. They returned before noon, faces pale, saying only, "There is something there that watches." Mai heard them when they passed. She sat unmoved, not because she lacked fear, but because she had passed through it long ago, like mist through trees. What came after fear was not bravery, it was belonging. The shrine had accepted her grief. Now it was accepting her silence. She spoke less each day. Some evenings she said nothing at all. Her voice remained strong, yet unused, like a bell waiting for the right wind. Even her footsteps became quieter. She moved like a shadow now, half seen, half imagined, her body thinning, but her presence deepening. Children passing by said they could hear weeping from the stones, but Mai had not cried in years. It was the shrine itself, weeping for the days when love had sound. One dusk, she heard chanting, faint, far, familiar. She followed it barefoot, out past the shrine, down toward the stream. The fog parted for her steps. There, on the other side of the water, was a figure. He stood facing away, uniform torn, hair long. The chanting was his, but not from his lips. It came from his chest, like a heartbeat that hummed in song. Mai stepped forward, into the stream, but before the water reached her ankles, he was gone. Only the sound remained, and then even that fell silent. She returned to the shrine soaked, her hands wrinkled and cold. She did not dry herself. Instead, she sat before the lantern, placed the mirror in her lap, and stared into the flame. No words, no movement, only silence. And in that silence, something shifted. The trees leaned closer. The air grew heavier. And for the first time in many seasons, the flame bent. Not from wind, not from breath, but from something standing beside her. Something that did not wish to speak, only to be known. Mai closed her eyes, and in the silence, she smiled. Because silence, when shared, is no longer empty. It becomes a presence. It becomes him.
The years no longer whispered their names. They came and went like passing clouds, some bright, some dark, all dissolving into one endless sky. Mai stopped counting them when the paper rotted and the ink dried in its well. Her face grew lined, but her spine remained straight. Her eyes faded, but her hearing sharpened. She knew every groan of the floorboard, every rustle of pine needles beyond the threshold. Her world shrank to the space between flame and silence, between offering bowl and the empty cushion beside her. She never left the forest again, not once. Villagers told stories about her. Some said she had become a ghost,
Others claimed she was possessed by the spirit she waited for. A few whispered that she never aged because she was no longer alive in the way mortals understood. They spoke with fear, but deep down they also spoke with awe. Because the shrine still stood, because the lantern never died, because something about her waiting made even the gods pause. Children, daring each other, left tokens at the forest edge. A carved doll, a ribbon, once a coin. But none ever stepped past the stone markers. And the one who did, a boy named Isamu, returned silent, face pale as snow, mouth unable to form words for 3 full days. When he finally spoke, he only said, "She looked at me, but not with her eyes." And that was enough. No child dared follow again. Then came the night of the first snow without wind. Mai sat beneath the lantern, now shielded in old paper and pine resin, its glow steady like a heartbeat. She had offered no words that day, only silence and her presence. She sat motionless until she heard it. A step, soft, dry, measured. Not the fall of a branch, not an animal's pad, a footstep. Then another, and another, crunching faintly over the frost-covered moss. She did not move. Her heart did not race. She had been waiting too long for fear to follow. They stopped just outside the shrine's reach. She did not turn, but she knew, in the marrow of her bones, that someone stood there. Not breathing, not shifting, only waiting, as she had. She raised her hand slowly, not in greeting, in offering. Her palm opened to the dark, and from it nothing was taken, but the steps retreated. 3 paces, then silence, then gone. The next morning, the frost had melted in a perfect circle where the steps had stood, and in the center a thread of red silk, knotted once. It had frayed at the ends, just like the thread she had once tied around his wrist. She did not cry. Tears were too shallow for a moment like this. Instead, she stood, slowly, reverently, and hung the thread above the shrine, not as decoration, but as evidence. Something had come, not in dream, not in memory, but with feet and weight and silence. And though it had not stayed, it had seen her, and that was enough, for now. She began to prepare for its return, not with expectation, not with joy, but with ritual. She swept the shrine thrice daily, replaced the mirror with polished obsidian, painted symbols in pine ash and crushed lotus across the floorboards, marks she did not learn from books, but from dreams, dreams that began after the footsteps, of robes fluttering just beyond sight, of hands that never touched but pressed warmth against her back, of voices that whispered only at dawn, always the same word, still. She understood. It meant still here, still waiting, still yours. At dusk, she laid out an extra bowl of tea, the second cushion, a folded cloth for wiping weary hands, and each night she heard the steps again, sometimes close, sometimes far, sometimes circling the shrine, never entering, as if waiting for her permission. So one night she turned her head to the dark and whispered, "You may come inside." The steps stopped, and nothing entered, But the lantern's flame bowed just once, then rose higher, and the scent of sandalwood filled the room. It was not yet time, she knew, but it was nearer than ever before. And though the footsteps never crossed the threshold, their echo remained, in the stillness, in the ash, in her breath. And now she waited not in solitude, but in company.
The forest had always spoken, but now it murmured her name. Not loudly, not in voice, but in signs. They came without warning, carried on winds that touched nothing else, left behind like forgotten thoughts, strange, out of place, familiar. May woke one morning to find the offering bowl full, not with rice or water, but with fine ash, sifted as if through the fingers of someone careful not to disturb her sleep. No wind had blown the night before. No fire had burned. Yet there it was, still warm. The next day, a feather appeared. Not a bird's feather, not soft or downy. This one was long, sleek, blacker than ink, edged in red as if dipped in sunset. She had seen such feathers once before, tucked into Kazuo's travel satchel when he returned briefly from training, laughing about a raven that had followed him for miles. It must like me, he'd joked. But he wasn't laughing when it perched outside their window for 3 nights. Now that same kind of feather rested at her shrine, its tip pointing toward the lantern. She did not ask who brought it. She only added it to the altar, beside the thread, beside the mirror, beneath the names. That night, the flame flickered in a different rhythm. 3 short pulses, a pause, then one long, as if spelling something. She listened until the oil burned out, then slept with the mirror beneath her pillow. Her dreams changed. They no longer unfolded in images, only sensations. She felt robes brushing past her, cold fingers grazing her cheek, the weight of a head resting gently in her lap. But when she reached to touch it, there was only smoke. Still, it comforted her. Even in absence, there was presence. Even in silence, she felt watched. On the 10th night of snowfall, she found something beneath her mat. A coin. But not the one Kazuo had left all those years ago. This one was new, shiny, untarnished, but etched with the same symbol, his regiment's crest. She held it close, whispering his name like a spell. And the forest answered, not in words, but in the sudden stillness that followed, the kind of silence that falls when something sacred crosses through the world unseen. From that day on, the veil grew thinner, not just between her and the shrine, but between before and after, between waiting and knowing. The line between memory and spirit blurred. She could no longer remember which moments had happened and which had only been felt. Did she see him standing outside the shrine one dawn? Or had it only been mist? Did he hear his laugh while boiling water? Or had the kettle just cracked? Did his shadow truly stretch across her lap one afternoon while she sewed? Or had she dreamed it with her eyes open? She did not mind, because each time doubt came, the veil whispered back, a song, a breath, a scent of cedar and river stones.
Kazuo had always smelled like that, like the place they first kissed, near the waterfall, when the trees had rained yellow leaves around them like blessings. That scent returned now, soft, lingering, real. More offerings appeared. A button from his old coat, one she had buried in a chest. A scrap of linen folded neatly in the shape of a crane. A second bowl, identical to hers, placed precisely opposite on the shrine's stone step. Someone, or something, had begun offering back. And then the voice. It came just once, near dusk. She had just lit the lantern, her hand steady despite the ache in her joints, when she heard it. Not loudly, not in voice, but inside, just behind her ear, as though whispered from a place no lips could reach. Still, a breath, a vow, a promise unfinished. She did not turn. She simply lowered her head and whispered in reply, "I know." From then on, she began to speak again. Not often. Only in the evening. Only to the shrine. She told stories of the house they never built, the child they almost had, the winters she weathered alone, the spring when she nearly left, the night she thought her waiting was foolish, the day she realized it wasn't. She told everything, and the veil listened. Sometimes the lantern flickered as if nodding. Sometimes the mirror clouded over like a blink. Sometimes she swore she saw her own lips moving, even when she had fallen silent, as if he had begun speaking through her. One dawn, when the frost had lifted and the trees held their breath, she stepped outside the shrine and spoke aloud. "You're near now, aren't you?" A crow landed on the stone step and bowed its head. And she understood. The veil was no longer between them. It was around them both. And it was thinning.
The forest no longer whispered. It breathed. Each pine needle swayed in rhythm with her steps. Each rock held warmth, as if remembering her presence. The birds did not return, but the silence became familiar, comforting, intimate. Mai walked with the stillness of someone no longer fully in the world. Her skin had thinned, her hair grown long and silvered like winter mist. But she moved as she always had, graceful, measured, deliberate. She was no longer a woman living in a shrine. She was the shrine, and the shrine was her. One morning, she awoke to the sound of footsteps not her own. They were hesitant, human, unfamiliar. She rose without alarm, tied her robe with quiet fingers, and stepped outside. An old monk stood at the edge of the path. His robes were faded, his back hunched, but his eyes were sharp, clouded not by age, but by something deeper. He bowed to her, deep, respectful, cautious. "You are the one they speak of, the widow who waits for the ghost." Mai did not answer, not out of rudeness, but because words could not explain what waiting had become. He continued, "I came not to chase you from this place, but to offer a warning." He reached into his sleeve and withdrew a scroll, bound in red string, sealed in wax.
old wax. I was told to give this to you many years ago. She stepped forward only when the wind stirred. She accepted the scroll with both hands. The monk's hands trembled slightly when they left hers. His voice dropped to a hush. There is a moon coming, one that returns every 30 winters. It thins the veil too far. If you remain beyond it, you will not belong to this side anymore. You will forget even your own name. Mai looked at the scroll. She did not unseal it. She simply looked up and asked, "Do you think I remember my name now?" The monk said nothing, only bowed again, this time with sorrow in his spine. Then he turned and left. The wind did not follow him. She returned to the shrine. The scroll lay in her lap. Her fingers caressed the edge of the wax, but never broke it. Instead, she fed it to the flame. The fire licked it once, twice. Then it burned clean, without smoke, without ash, as if the words inside had already been said long ago. That night, the forest was restless. The pines shivered though no wind passed. The foxes cried out once, then vanished. Even the lantern hesitated before lighting. But Mai remained calm. She placed a second mat beside her own. She laid out 2 bowls. She whispered 2 prayers, and when she bowed, the air bowed with her. The next morning, something strange happened. There was frost on the roof, but not on the shrine. The earth around it had grown warm. The moss was lush. The flowers bloomed out of season. And at the center of the altar sat a folded letter, unsealed, written in a hand she knew better than her own, Kazuo's. She did not open it. She did not need to. She simply held it to her chest and let the silence read it aloud inside her. Later, she burned it too, not in rejection, in completion. Some messages are meant to reach beyond, and ashes, when offered in devotion, become incense in another world. For the next 13 nights, the lantern glowed brighter than ever, and the flame no longer flickered with the breeze. It pulsed in time with her heart. 1 beat, 2, then a pause, then again. The moon grew full and red. The villagers whispered of old legends, of gates that opened, of souls that wandered, of lovers who crossed too far to return. They lit their own lanterns, farther from the shrine, as if to protect themselves, but Mai lit only one, her own, because she was not afraid of being taken. She had already gone, long ago. With every breath, with every prayer, with every year of waiting, she had crossed, and now perhaps he had returned to lead her the rest of the way. When the blood moon rose fully, she knelt beside the altar. She placed her hand upon the floorboards where his coin had once lain, and for the first time in years, she wept. Not from sorrow, from arrival, from fulfillment. The veil did not need to part anymore. It had always been open, waiting for her to see clearly. She closed her eyes and breathed, and for a moment, just one, she heard footsteps behind her, familiar, firm, and a voice, no longer a whisper, say, "You kept your promise."
There is a season in the forest when things forget what they are. The leaves do not fall. The branches do not grow. The ground does not thaw or freeze. It is not spring, not winter, not even the in-between. It is simply still. And in that stillness, names begin to fade. First, the names of birds, then the names of trees, then her own. It happened without pain. One morning, she rose to prepare the ritual as always, kneeling by the incense stone, her joints creaking softly like old wood in wind. She reached for the lacquered bowl, and in the silence before she touched it, she tried to remember how she used to greet herself, the name she once answered to, the name he used to say in the dark when they whispered dreams into each other's skin. But it was gone. Not erased, just shed, like a robe left behind in a past life. She did not panic. She simply bowed her head and whispered, "Good morning," not to herself, not to anyone, just to the space between, the place where his voice had once lived. And though no name answered, the flame still flickered, which meant she was still seen, even if no longer called. The villagers still knew her by one word, the widow. But even that felt too solid. She did not mourn anymore. She did not expect. She did not long. She simply was, a presence that breathed beside the shrine, a movement that belonged to the forest, a body that flickered like light between ribs of trees. Once, a passing traveler lost his way and stumbled into her clearing. He froze at the edge, staring at the lantern, at the altar, at the woman kneeling in silence. "He forgave me," he said. "I thought no one lived this deep." She turned to him slowly, kindly. He asked, "What is this place called?" She opened her mouth, then paused. She realized it had no name. The shrine, the altar, even the forest itself, all of it had become unspoken, alive only in ritual, not in language. She smiled gently. "It's just here," she said, and he bowed, then left, and when he tried to return to it later, he could not find it again. She no longer wrote in the dirt, no longer carved symbols in bark. What need was there for names, for memory, for identity? The forest recognized her without any of it. So did the shrine. And, she believed, so did he. That season stretched longer than any before. She did not mark the days. Time had dissolved into air and moss. Even her reflection, on rare clear mornings when dew pooled in stone hollows, no longer startled her. It was not a stranger, but not a self either, just a witness. The dreams deepened. She no longer dreamed in pictures, only warmth. A shoulder leaning against hers, a hand held out, a breath close to her cheek. Sometimes she reached for it, sometimes she simply let it be. He was there. That was all that mattered. One evening, while sweeping the shrine path, she noticed something new. Footprints, 2 sets. One hers, soft and light. One larger, deeper, beside hers, mirroring every step. They led all the way to the shrine, then disappeared at the threshold. She did not cry. She did not smile. She simply stepped inside and whispered, "You remember me, even if I've forgotten." That night, when she lit the lantern, she saw her own shadow cast behind her. But a second shadow, faint and flickering, stood beside it, not overlapping, not following, just with her. She did not turn to see it. She only bowed to it, and it bowed back. She no longer wondered what day it was, no longer recalled her village name, no longer thought of her reflection.
But each morning she lit the flame. Each dusk she folded 2 cushions. Each night she whispered into the veil, "I am still here." And each night the veil replied, not in words, but in recognition. And that was enough. When you lose your name, but keep your promise, you do not disappear. You become something else, something sacred, something kept.
It began with stillness, not the ordinary kind, not silence, not peace, but a stillness that felt alive, alert, as though the trees were holding breath, as though the forest itself had stepped back to watch. Mai noticed it the moment the lantern lit without her touch. The flame rose gently, all on its own, with no match, no spark, no breeze to stir it. She did not react. She only lowered her eyes and whispered, "You found the way back." That evening the air changed. It grew dense, not heavy, thicker than fog, but soft, fragrant. Sandalwood and iron, rain on stone, threadbare cloth warmed by sun, the scent of him, the one no one else could remember, but she could, even now, even without her name. She stood at the doorway of the shrine, her fingers curled gently around the post, and waited, not in hope, in readiness. The first sign came in the moss. It parted, not crushed, not trampled, parted, as if making way. Step by step, the forest gave itself to something unseen. And then, it was no longer unseen. A shape stepped into the edge of the lantern light, not solid, not shadow, but present, real in the way fog is real, when it wraps around your arms and you feel it, even if you cannot grasp it. He stood still, not close, not far. His face was veiled in dark, not from hiding, from mercy. But his posture was familiar. Straight spine, slight tilt of the shoulder from an old injury. Hands at his sides, as if resisting the urge to reach. She did not need to see him. Her body already knew. Her breath had already adjusted. Her soul, if it still held shape, had already leaned forward. When he spoke, it wasn't with a voice, it was with a wind. It passed through the trees, across the shrine, and into her chest. One word, carried like an autumn leaf, Mai. It was her name, her true name, the one she had forgotten, the one she had never spoken aloud in years. And he said it as if no time had passed, as if her silence had never interrupted their conversation. She smiled. It was small, quiet, the smile of someone who had waited so long she no longer knew how to show joy in large gestures. She took a single step forward, but not to reach him, to welcome him. "Are you hungry?" she asked. Her voice didn't shake, her hands didn't tremble. She knelt before the altar, poured tea into both bowls, laid out the rice she had prepared with no appetite, lit the second flame, and then she opened her palm. The red thread still coiled within it, frayed, faded, intact. She placed it between them. He moved closer, not walking, drifting, not like a ghost, like memory returning to its source. The flame between them bent inward, as if drawn to his presence. He lowered himself to the second cushion,
and though no weight pressed it down, Mai saw it dip. She poured the tea, his bowl steamed. Neither spoke again. There was no need. They sat in the glow of the shrine, side by side, one with flesh, one with shadow, both with presence, both with promise. She reached forward slowly and laid her fingers where his hand would be. And she felt warmth, real warmth, not imagined, not conjured, warmth that passed from beyond the veil, through time, through silence, through waiting. Her eyes closed, and for a moment, not a breath, not a blink, but a full, beating moment, she leaned against him, and he did not vanish. He held. They stayed until the lantern dimmed, until the second flame began to fade, until the forest resumed its breath. Then, gently like the lifting of morning fog, he rose and bowed. Not a farewell, a reverent, eternal greeting. She remained kneeling, her hand resting over her heart, and her lips parting once more to say the only words that mattered. You're home. When she opened her eyes, he was gone. But the cushion remained warm, the bowl still full, and the thread glowed faintly, pulsing once, twice, then still. She did not cry. She had done enough of that in younger years. Now she simply rose, folded the cushion he had used, and placed it gently beneath the altar, a keepsake of a night long promised, a shrine within a shrine. And as the first light of morning crept over the trees, Mai stood in its quiet, sacred hush and whispered, I will keep the flame burning until you return again.
The body remembers what the soul tries to forget. It holds the aches, the weight, the years. But even that, in time, begins to soften, fade, dissolve. Mai no longer noticed the stiffness in her knees, the tremble in her hands, the weight of her own limbs. She moved by ritual, not by will. And slowly, the flesh began to forget the bone. Her arms grew thinner, fingers delicate as incense ash. Her back bowed forward, not in pain, but in reverence. Her spine curled like the stem of a blossom, bending toward the earth it came from. Even her breath changed, slower, shallower, measured like the wind through pine needles. The shrine watched this. So did the trees. But none interfered, because what she was becoming was not death. It was something else, something between. Moss grew thicker beneath her feet. At first it was gentle, soft and green like velvet woven by the forest itself. Then it spread, up her sandals, around her ankles, each day a little higher. She made no effort to remove it. It did not choke. It held, warm, damp, living, a kind of embrace. One night during the still hour between moonrise and dawn, she awoke to find vines wrapped around her wrists. Not tight, just resting there, like hands folded in prayer. She touched them lightly, murmured no protest, and closed her eyes again. By morning, they were gone, but the feeling remained, as though something had tried to hold her together before she drifted too far. She began to chant again, not in words she remembered. They came unbidden,
in syllables she hadn't spoken since childhood, or perhaps never at all. The shrine seemed to hum in reply, not loud, but low, a frequency that curled in the bones, that echoed in the corners of the ribs, that sang in the hollows of the lungs. It was the voice of things older than names, older than mourning, older than love. One evening, as the light faded from the trees, Mai took the red thread, now brittle with age, and wound it around her wrist once more. Then around the corner of the shrine's altar, then around her other wrist. She tied no knots, only loops, a gesture of tethering, of belonging. "If I begin to drift," she whispered, "this will remind me where I chose to stay." The thread pulsed once, as if it too remembered the vow. She no longer needed food, not out of denial, out of change. The offerings remained, rice, tea, water, but she did not consume. She inhaled steam. She pressed her lips to warmth. But the sustenance came from somewhere else now, from the flame, from the moss, from memory. Her hair, once black, now shimmered silver in moonlight, falling over her shoulders like a bridal veil. Her skin lost its weight. She moved without sound. When she walked, even the leaves beneath her did not rustle. It was not that she had become spirit, it was that she had become still enough to be mistaken for one. Visitors to the village spoke of seeing a woman made of mist kneeling before a glowing shrine, of hearing a voice like wind chimes chanting words that made their hearts ache, though they could never recall them later. One painter came and tried to capture her. He left with blank canvas and trembling hands. He said, "She wasn't there, and yet she looked at me." Inside, Mai no longer marked time by days or moons, only by moments when the flame flared unbidden, by echoes in her bones, by the way her reflection had vanished completely from the mirror, now just a soft gray shimmer where a face once lived. One afternoon, she collapsed, quietly, without fear. She simply lowered herself beside the altar and closed her eyes again. The moss welcomed her. So did the silence. But the shrine resisted. Its walls creaked, the floor groaned, the air pulsed. It would not take her fully, not yet. And so she rose again, slower than before, but smiling. Because even as her flesh forgot how to carry her, her devotion remembered how to keep her standing. And the shrine, bound by red thread and memory, remembered too. Some nights her hands could no longer grasp the bowl, so the wind lifted it, placed it gently in her lap. Some mornings her eyes refused to open, so the flame lit by itself. And once, just once, when her heart stuttered like a bird in winter, she heard his voice say, softly, "Not yet." So she stayed, in the shrine that held her body, in the thread that held her vow, in the moss that held her roots, and in the light that never forgot to return.
There comes a time in devotion when what is offered is emptiness. Not by neglect, but by design. By understanding that the act of giving matters more than what is given. Mai had reached that time. The forest, once generous with its moss and flowers, now gave nothing. No blossoms bloomed, no fruit fell. Even the stream had narrowed into silence, its waters withdrawn into the earth like breath held too long. And so each morning, Mai carried her bowls to the shrine, as she had always done, but now they were empty. 2 of them, one for her, one for him. She placed them carefully on the altar, hands steady despite the ache that lived deep within her fingers. She bowed low, held the silence between her breaths like a cup, and whispered her chant. Not words, only rhythm. Like waves, like memory brushing the edge of the world. The first day she offered emptiness, the flame flickered violently, as if protesting. But she did not waver. She simply lit the incense, laid the thread across both bowls, and whispered, "Even nothing is something when offered with love." The second day, the wind howled outside the shrine. It ripped through the trees, knocking pine needles loose, shaking shutters that had not moved in years. But inside, the bowls remained untouched. No dust, no ash, just emptiness, cradled in reverence. On the third day, the flame did not light at all. She tried 3 times, her fingers trembling from cold, her eyes dim with age, still no flame. So she bowed without it, and the moment her forehead touched the wood, warmth rose through the floor. Not fire, but presence, as if the shrine itself had leaned forward and breathed into her skin. From then on, the empty bowl became the ritual, the message, the mirror. She no longer brought offerings from the earth. She offered the silence she carried, the longing she had tamed, the body she had stayed in long past its prime. She offered herself, and the shrine accepted. One evening, the sky turned the color of old parchment, faded gold, veined with gray. The birds returned for a moment, not to sing, only to pass overhead, migrating elsewhere. Mai watched them from the doorway, the bowls already laid out behind her, empty as always. She did not weep. She only whispered, "You may go. I'm already home." That night, when she entered the shrine, she found ashes in both bowls. Not from any fire, not from any hand, just fine, pale ashes, soft as dust, resting in perfect circles as if someone had gently pressed them there with careful fingertips. She did not clean them away. She placed a thread over each, lit the lantern, and whispered, "Thank you." The forest remained still for 3 days. No wind, no animals, not even the groan of trees. It was as though the woods had stopped completely just to hear her voice. She continued her ritual in silence, pouring no tea, placing no rice, only her hands, her breath, her presence. By the 7th day, even the mirror had fogged over permanently. No reflection, no form, only light, soft, golden, constant. And within it, 2 faint blurs, sitting side by side. She did not need proof. Her faith had never asked for signs. Only presence, only return. And now it was here, all around her. Not loud, not visible, but real. Some say faith is a call for reward,
But Mai knew better. Faith is a continuation, a path walked without evidence, a hand held out even when it may never be touched again. And now, in the flicker of that tired lantern, she felt it. A hand touching hers. Not fully, just enough to say, "I see you." And so she offered her final bowl, empty, still warm from her hands, still fragrant with her breath, still holy in its nothingness. Because sometimes what you leave empty is what invites return. Not all flames burn. Some shimmer without heat, some flicker without source, some simply appear when the waiting has grown deep enough to touch the other side. Mai noticed it on the first night of the silent moon. A second light, small, still, hovering just to the left of her lantern. Not fire, not smoke, just a glow, as if a thought had taken shape beside her. She did not speak. She only bowed, then rose slowly, her knees aching, and returned inside the shrine. The next evening it returned, the same spot, the same stillness, and when she knelt again, she noticed something else. The shadows had changed. Her own stretched long behind her, thin and flickering. But a second shadow now fell beside it, not touching, not moving, just present, as though the flame had begun casting reflections of what could not be seen. She did not ask questions. What would be the point? She had long since passed the age of needing answers. Now she moved with the rhythm of knowing, of sensing, of breathing into what came. So she laid out a second bowl once more, not out of habit, out of recognition. Something was sharing space with her. Whether spirit, memory, or something nameless, it had returned, and it was hungry, not for food, but for place, for presence, for acknowledgement. That night, the second flame blinked once, then again, then rose higher until it matched the height of her own. And though no warmth reached her fingers, she swore she felt her palms tingle, as if another set of hands hovered just above them, mirroring her movement. From then on, 2 flames lit each evening. Sometimes one would appear before the other. Sometimes they flickered in time. Sometimes they breathed. Faint pulses, like a chest rising and falling, like a heartbeat. 2 of them. Her own and the one that had followed the thread through time. The villagers began to speak again, of lights seen through the trees, of twin lanterns that danced between branches with no holders, of chants heard in pairs, low, murmured, overlapping in different voices, one old, one familiar, one never heard before, and yet comforting. One monk from a distant temple traveled for days to find her. When he reached the shrine, he did not enter. He stood at the edge of the clearing, sandals pressed deep into moss. He stared at the twin lights, then whispered, "She is no longer alone," and returned without speaking to her. Some truths are too holy for words. Inside the shrine, Mai had begun speaking aloud again, not to herself, to him, the one who sat beside her, though no cushion held his shape. She asked questions she had once feared. "Were you scared? Did it hurt? Were you trying to find me all this time? No voice replied, but the flame pulsed in rhythm, and that was enough. Sometimes she laughed softly, at memories, at the strangeness of two flames in a room where only one body remained. She even began telling stories again, ones they never finished. Stories of the house they planned to build, of the child she once dreamed might come, of a world that had never unfolded but still lived in their bones. She did not cry when she spoke of these things, because nothing had been lost, only delayed, only rerouted, like wind shifting through trees, finding its way back home. On the 7th night of the twin lanterns, something changed. She awoke before dawn. The air was thick, heavy, full of presence. She sat up slowly. The shrine's door, left ajar, swayed once. Outside, the two flames still glowed. But now, between them, hung a shape. Not solid, not smoke, just a suggestion of a figure kneeling, bowing, facing her. She rose. Her bones cracked, but her breath remained steady. She stepped into the chill morning and knelt across from it, bow for bow, silence for silence. And as she raised her head, the figure dissolved into both flames. They flickered, merged, then separated again. From then on, she knew. The two lanterns were not simply signs. They were gateways between longing and return, between devotion and reunion, between this world and the next. Each night they burned, and each morning she left both bowls out, both cushions, both prayers. Even when the offerings were only steam and ash, she prepared them with both hands, one trembling, one remembered. Because now she was no longer waiting for him to arrive. She was keeping space for him to stay.
There were nights when the veil no longer separates. It breathes, it opens, it waits. The forest knew this one would be such a night. The lanterns lit before dusk. The wind knelt. The stars did not come. Only a hush, thick, sacred, expectant, filled the trees. Mai did not need to prepare. Everything was already in place. The bowls, the cushions, the thread, the flame. And in the center of the shrine, the altar she had built with her own hands decades ago, now worn smooth by devotion. She bathed in silence, wrapped her robe tighter, brushed her silver hair once, then sat. The second flame pulsed in greeting. The moss beneath her shifted, soft as skin, and the air grew warm, then warmer, not with heat, but with presence. That night, he came again, not as shadow, not as memory, but as form, not full, not flesh, but more than spirit, a shimmer made of breath and bone, a man made of vow and waiting. He stood just outside the light, head bowed, then stepped forward, each movement silent but undeniable. Mai did not move. She only reached slowly into a box carved from driftwood, one she had not opened in many years. Inside, the coin, the one he gave her, the one engraved with their family crest, still warm, still shining. She pressed it to her lips, then placed it on her tongue, like a vow swallowed whole, and the veil opened. Not with thunder, not with light, but with a quiet sigh, a curtain lifting between lifetimes. The shrine changed, the walls stretched, the roof disappeared,
The pines leaned inward until they circled the space like a temple, and around her shadows gathered, figures in robes, in rags, in armor, some with no faces, some weeping ash, some holding lanterns of their own. They formed a circle, unmoving, witnesses. At the center, he knelt before her, hands resting on thighs, eyes like smoke curling through old paper. He did not speak, but his presence did. And she replied not with words, but with her body. She bowed, as brides once did before ancestral shrines. And when she rose, he placed his palm over her chest, right above her heart. Not to take it, to recognize it. She chanted, not in language, but in rhythm, a soft echo of the wedding prayer they never got to finish, only now played in reverse, not to begin a life together, but to finish one they had already shared, in silence, across time. The coin melted on her tongue, without heat, without pain. It became breath, then memory, then light. And when she opened her eyes, he was closer, his hand now cupping her cheek, no longer hovering, touching. She did not flinch, she leaned into it, let her face rest in the curve of a hand she had not felt since youth. And in that stillness, the vow completed, not spoken, not signed, but just felt. A full circle drawn between worlds, a line unbroken, a promise held so long it had become part of the soul. The shadows around them bowed, one by one they vanished, not in fear, but in peace, released by the closing of a bond older than death. And when all was still again, he stood, turned, and walked toward the edge of the shrine, then stopped. Without looking back, he extended his hand, waiting, inviting. Mai rose but did not follow, not yet. She untied the thread from the altar, wrapped it around her wrist, once, twice, 3 times, then stepped forward and placed her fingers in his. And in that moment, she did not belong to the forest, nor to the shrine, nor to time. She belonged only to the promise, the one that held the dead, and the one who had kept it.
The forest exhaled. After years, perhaps centuries of holding breath, it finally let go. Mist lifted from the roots. The pines no longer leaned in mourning. Wildflowers bloomed along the old paths once thought forgotten, and birds returned, first in silence, then in song. The shrine still stood, no longer untouched, but not abandoned. Its wood was dark with age, split in places where rain had seeped through. Moss lined the eaves, curling gently over the stone threshold like green lace. And around it, circling like a protective charm, were roots. Not invasive, not destructive, just holding, like arms around something sacred. No one lived there anymore, not in the way villagers understood. No sandals pressed the dirt path, no bowls were filled, no voice chanted in the morning. But the lantern still glowed, dimly, faint, like the last star before sunrise, like a breath held just a little longer. Some who passed the edge of the forest claimed the shrine was empty. Others said they saw a woman kneeling there, old, ageless, eyes closed, lips moving in prayer.
And once a traveler swore he saw two figures, one lighting incense, one placing thread across the altar. When he looked again, they were gone. Only the smoke remained. No one touched the shrine. Children still left ribbons near the entrance. Monks bowed as they passed. And once a year, when the fog came in from the west, villagers lit lanterns in their own homes, twin flames, and whispered her name, even if they no longer remembered what it was, because some names are not spoken, they are felt. Inside the shrine, the cushions had faded, the altar had cracked, but in the center of it all lay a single thread, red, still bright, still looped around a mark in the floor where two sets of knees had once pressed into wood. And beside it, a coin, melted flat, stamped with a family crest no one could trace. At dawn, the lantern flickered, just once, as though someone had exhaled beside it. The flame tilted to the left, then to the right, then straightened, steady again, as if it had decided to stay. The shrine was not empty, not truly. It held every offering ever placed, every vow whispered into the dark, every chant carried across lifetimes. And above all, it held presence, not in form, but in echo, like the hush that follows a wedding prayer, like the warmth that lingers in a room long after a goodbye. The woman who once waited was never buried. No stone marked her resting place, but her story lived in roots, in moss, in the breath of trees that had grown from soil shaped by her steps. She had not vanished. She had woven in. And the one she waited for? He stayed too. Not in shadow, but in light. In the second flame that flickered with no wind, in the space beside the cushion where no one ever sat, in the bowl that never emptied though nothing was ever placed inside. They had become ritual. They had become shrine. They had become promise. So if you ever find yourself deep in a forest, one where no birds sing, and the path seems to turn without cause, listen closely. You may hear two voices, one old, one remembered, both whispering in rhythm. And if you see a faint light at dawn, flickering behind the trees, do not be afraid. It is only a woman who waited and a man who returned, keeping their vow, together, always.